Hello and welcome to Friday Conversations. I'm Matt.
And I'm Fiona.
And it's great to have you with us today. We are continuing our current series at the moment where we are exploring this book together. It's called Blessed, Broken, Given by Glenn Packiam. That's what it looks like. I know those of us who tune in regularly have been reading and following along. Today is our penultimate session. We are looking at chapter 10 today, and then next week we will be looking at the final chapter, which will finish off nicely just before Christmas and the festive season, the festive period. So we've timed that well, haven't we? So all on purpose, I'll have you know.
Yes.
So
that's why we did 2 chapters at once.
Well, yes, we had to squeeze them in to finish before Christmas. You're quite right. So that's what we're doing tonight. Blessed, Broken, Given. And the book uses an image or a metaphor of bread. And of course, that's echoed throughout Scripture as well in the Bible. And there's 3 main parts. And of course, because we're near the end now, we are looking at given, the third part. And I thought it would be helpful for those watching if we just quickly summarize sort of this section about being given, just so that we can sort of get the ball rolling a bit. So in the first section of given, we were looking at the personal dynamic of what being given meant, which was for the love of Jesus. And we discussed about being drained and being spent and what the difference was.
Yes. And the fundamental motivation for being willing to be given is actually love for Jesus. That's where it springs from.
Yeah, for the love of Jesus, that's right. And it's our surrender to Jesus that actually enables us to be given for the sake of others. And then in the second section, for one another, so being given for one another, which was looking at hospitality, about giving, about serving others. And this was more of a communal dynamic. And we were talking about church, weren't we, and the picture of church and how it's actually the point of church and gathering together is more about serving others than it is about me getting stuff for me.
Yes. And
so that brings us to this third and final section today, for the life of the world.
Yes.
So we've had a personal dynamic, we've had a communal dynamic, and now we're looking more at a cultural dynamic, kind of more wider than just sort of individual or the community, the sort of church community.
Yes.
We're looking much wider at culture in general today.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I mean just his introduction to this chapter says, Jesus called himself the bread that came down from heaven and announced that his body was given for the life of the world. And if we as the church are to see ourselves as Christ's body here in the world, then part of what it means to be given is to be in the world for the world's own good.
For the world's own good, that's good. And we have a question to put to you. We love to interact. We have a conversation together on screen, but we're not the only people involved in the conversation, or at least we hope not to be the only 2 people involved in the conversation, because it's a live stream. We like to throw it open to you as well. Please join in the conversation with us tonight. Please use the live chat on YouTube. Put your comments in. We will read them out. Do you just say hello to a few people who we know who are already watching?
Well, yes, we've got Richard and Maggie who are here, and Andy McCadden, Jackie, Clive, who is...
Tell us a bit of Clive's story, because some people may not know.
Clive has been in bed for the previous 2 days. He managed to get up for the first time today. He's done his back in again. But he's back in bed, but he's on the live stream.
He's back in bed with his back.
That's right, yes. Yes. And then there's Sally and Keith. So quite a few people in.
Great.
Jackie saying, I found this chapter interesting and challenging, namely that God is being airbrushed out of our culture. And Keith saying, the world takes things for itself. Jesus gives himself. What a difference.
Oh, Alex and Lynn have just said hello as well.
Yes.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
What question are we going to throw out just to start the ball rolling on the live chat?
It's this, what cultural shifts have you noticed in your own community, within your lifespan, I suppose? What are the cultural shifts that are noticeable? And that's something. Well, we've already sort of had a bit of this. Jackie saying about God being airbrushed out.
Yeah. So if there's anything like that, pop them in, and we'll come and visit them again in about 10-15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start then. Chapter 10.
Yes.
So we'll say, wave your book around if you got it, but we won't see you, but you can do it if you like. Well, that's a bit later, Road to Emmaus. I'm skipping ahead.
Oh, yes, you are.
I am. So, let us make a beginning. So, we're looking at, he has a big story about his upbringing in Malaysia and the sort of the cultural melting pot, as it were, that he experienced growing up.
That's right.
Where lots of different religions sort of came alongside each other and were sort of all present in the same space.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know we, or even I as well, refer to sort of the culture on it's a secular culture, but he argues that it isn't, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, he talks about the fact that whereas, certainly in this country, when I was a child, the general assumption was that Christianity was the main sort of religion, and even if people weren't particularly religious, that was the broad framework in which they were reared. Whereas now, of course, we have a much broader range of different religions and none, and the whole question of the fact that we've got such a very plural set of religions and philosophies about, what we actually get is a much more secular age as a result. Because I think there was a...
But what he's saying about the secular idea is that secular is kind of removing God. And yes, in some instances, as Jackie was saying, God is people are trying to airbrush God out of things. And we can see that in some respects. But he's saying that it's because of the multiplicity of lots of different religions in one space that they kind of can't, the effectiveness or whatever, are cancelling each other out in a way, where people go, oh well, if you believe this and you believe something different, but you're both still good people, then what does it matter? And I don't believe anything, so, and I'm a good person, so what does it matter?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's where the bit about the secularist sort of thing, because basically, for a lot of people, well, probably for most people, most of the time, what they're actually focused on is my life, my career, my possessions, my family, all the stuff about, and they want, to live in peace and sort of for things to go well for them and so on. And actually, mostly the whole focus is on what's immediately around you. And of course, if you can see that, okay, I come from a Christian background, somebody else from a Jewish, somebody else from a Hindu background or whatever, or some people don't believe anything at all, but actually they're all focused on the same things, and with a general desire, one hopes, to kind of get along with other people. And so it can almost seem like it's kind of irrelevant what you believe, because everybody's just trying to sort of make the best of the world they're in. And so therefore God, in that sense, gets airbrushed out, because they don't really think he's that relevant.
Yes, that's it. It's a religious indifference.
That's right.
More than a rejection of God, which is what I think he is sort of teaming secularization up with, sort of an outright flat rejection of God. He's saying it isn't really a rejection of God, it's more a religious indifference. Well, what does it matter? If there is a God, if there isn't a God, well,
Yes.
it doesn't mean anything to me.
That's right, because what the concern is my quality of life. What he puts here, yes, we are left to wonder if faith actually has any bearing on the quality of life or the way we live it. If a person may have the same quality of life as another while believing radically different things, then maybe religious belief doesn't matter, is what so many people have assumed. And then sometimes you see Christians whose lives have fallen apart and non-Christians whose lives seem to be working. So you sort of think, well, it's made no difference. Of course, I don't agree with that assumption,
No.
Nor does he. But that's the thing, that for the world at large, it's like, if there is a God, well, does it make any difference?
Yeah. I must admit, when I was reading this bit, I was thinking, well, for me, someone who has been in a relationship with Jesus, who knows Jesus and who's been trying to get to know God, and has the Holy Spirit sort of working in me and on me, you kind of think, well, okay, if you haven't got the Holy Spirit working in you, then okay, you could kind of just view every religion as, that's just something that you do.
In fact, there's quite a lot of comments on this one in here, yes. So, Clive's asking the question, what would be different if the church wasn't active in the world? And that's something to be looking at probably a little later on in the thing. But we've got, so Maggie saying, a huge difference since I was young, when you could assume most people knew the Bible stories. We were all sent to Sunday school. Now many people know nothing, so we have to start from where they are. That's one of the big cultural shifts.
It is.
And Richard's saying he notices a rise of aggressive humanism.
Yes.
And Keith, I've noticed the growth of the idea of rights and entitlement. Many now believe that they have a right to do what they feel. They need to help themselves first before others. That's certainly very common. And Jackie's got sound bites from the recent census indicate a decrease in people regarding themselves as Christian or even believing in any religion. And Lynn's put, it's been suggested to me by various people that different religions are actually the same, which is a very commonly held view. And Keith, the rise of the religion of science. Science is God and the truth, and we must bow down to what they call scientific knowledge. Yeah. And then Jackie underlining, the Bible tells us the earth is God's and everything in it. The issue is whether that's true or not. If it is, God exists as he is, irrespective of our views about it. And of course, if it is his, then that actually would have a big impact, because it implies, if it belongs to him, it implies that somehow we're going to be accountable to him. Whereas if we're assuming that he's really irrelevant, if he even exists at all,
and the world is ours,
that's right, then what matters, as people, like Keith was pointing out, that people sort of think, well, what matters is, what am I getting, what's my due, am I flourishing as I should, and what there's all that kind of thing. But the idea that I might actually be accountable to somebody else for a life which doesn't belong to me, that's a very radically different approach. And that's where we find ourselves in the big cultural divide from the secular view of society and a fundamentally Christian view that actually, yes, the earth is the Lord's, and therefore he has the right to kind of set the rules, and he is the one who will call us to account for what we've done with what he's placed us in.
So he kind of sets the scene, doesn't he?
Yes, it does set the scene.
And then he moves on to the road to Emmaus.
Yes, that's a very good passage.
Yes. Do you want to read the actual passage?
Yes, we can do.
He gives quite a good summary of it.
Yes, actually, that's probably better than reading the whole, because it's quite a long passage, isn't it? So,
well, we could give our own summary of it.
Yes. Okay.
So what happens, Fiona?
Yes. Well, this is at the end of Luke's Gospel in chapter 24, where there are two people who have been disciples of Jesus, and
not necessarily part of the 12.
No, but they were certainly close disciples. They were obviously
part
close
of the
disciples.
circle
We don't know whether.
Yeah.
But they. But after his crucifixion, they've got totally disillusioned. Obviously, all their hopes and dreams are shattered. What they were expecting, hasn't happened. As he puts it, they were disillusioned and distressed, confused and disorientated. How could this have all happened? And they're walking to this village called Emmaus when somebody joins them on the journey. Actually,
they don't recognise the person.
No.
And the person, they start chatting, but the person seems to not know what's been going on. It's like they haven't been watching the news channel or something, and they have got no idea as to what's been happening and what's all the latest gossip in Jerusalem and all this kind of thing. And so they start explaining to him about the Messiah and the crucifixion and how it's all terrible and
that's right.
Why they're feeling like they are.
That's right. And then he begins to talk to them about, have you not read your scriptures? And he goes through the Old Testament scriptures that point to himself, because this is Jesus who's walking with them. And he actually explains to them how all these things actually were foretold. This is what actually was happening. And they're obviously, later they say, weren't our hearts burning within us as he talked with us on the road? It's like something is beginning to spark here. Maybe, they are, when they get to where they're going, they ask him to stay. Which is interesting. But I rather liked the way he put this here. Jesus joined the disappointed and the disillusioned in their journey. He didn't say, come over here or come to me or come follow me. No, that was all well and fine the first time, but not this time, not when faith had been shattered, when hopes had been badly broken. When we're too weak, too broken to come to Jesus, he comes to us. He himself joins us on the journey. That thing, it's like he's meeting them where they are, not sort of saying, well, come on, you've failed, you need to come over here. He actually meets them where they're at. And I think that's one of the key things. So if we're going to be given for the life of the world, we need to be able to meet people wherever they're at on their journey. Some of them don't even know they're on a journey. Some of them are knowing they're on a journey, but they're looking in all the wrong places or whatever. But if you don't actually meet them where they're at, they won't. In a sense, you've got to show them that no, this message is relevant where you are now.
And that's a good point, which gets revisited again in a slightly different way. Jesus comes to meet these people where they're at.
Yes.
And later on, he talks about us as the church, as Jesus's body on earth, going out to meet people, to meet the culture, to meet people within the culture around us where they are.
That's right.
And we'll come back to that.
Yes, that's right. That we do actually need to be connecting with people where they are. Doesn't mean you have to join them in their belief, or that you have to adapt, your all that you stand for, to fit in with the spirit of the age. That's the sort of that's the other mistake the church can make. One is being totally irrelevant, apparently, to anything that's going on. The other is trying to sort of blend in.
To pick up on every latest fad.
That's right, and to allow our
you
own
end
faith.
up looking so much like the world that no one can tell the difference whether you're the world or the church. The church is actually meant to be different.
That's right, and sort of effectively trying to change the unchanging things. God does not adapt himself to the situation because he doesn't change. But and so yes, the idea that we should allow the current spirit of the world to dictate the church's policy is not a good one.
But I like this bit here, just sort of finishing the story from the road to Emmaus. So they invite him to stay, and he then breaks the bread, which is quite different in that culture because he's the guest. And usually the guest sits and receives, and the host breaks and
the bread.
Gives and hosts.
Takes the bread, blesses it, gives thanks. And
but he takes the role on as host, even though he's supposed to be the guest. And as he breaks the bread, their eyes are opened and they recognize this is Jesus. They recognize it. And I just like the way he puts it in the book. I'll just read this a little bit. It's beautiful, isn't it? What made them realize it was Jesus was the way he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. Of all the Jesus-like things to recognize Jesus by, the miracles, the teachings, the stories, it was the breaking of bread that opened their eyes.
Yes.
Luke was making a point. There's something about bread that is blessed, broken, and given that makes us see Jesus.
Yes.
It shakes us out of our disillusionment and wakes us up from our despair about religion. Once our eyes are lifted up, once they are opened to see Jesus.
Yes. Yes. And that's the thing, is it's to sort of, in a sense, to be willing to, yes, if we're willing to be given, then we can actually introduce people to the one who's giving us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
We'll
this
do
the
one
pause
more
point?
bit. No, we
Right,
won't
okay.
pause just yet.
Okay.
Soon, but not yet. He then goes on to tell a very interesting story, which again shows the pluralism of religion around us, and that whole, well, believe what you want to believe, and I don't have to believe what you believe, but you believe what you want, all this kind of
that
stuff.
can be true for you.
Your
It's not
truth,
true
your
for me.
personal
Yes, your
truth,
personal
and
truth.
my personal truth, and all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. He talks about meeting a Catholic Buddhist or seeing an interview of a guy who said he was a Catholic Buddhist, and he said even just the notion of, if anyone knows anything about Catholicism and Buddhism, is that the two don't mix.
No.
But this is what this guy, was, or says that he was. But he said it was very interesting because the ideas that this chap was putting forth in the interview, he said they actually were all coming from a Christian view of the world rather than a Buddhist one.
Yes.
And he says he wanted to speak about redemption without naming the Redeemer.
Yes.
And that's interesting. And I find this interesting. So let me just read something from 174. Where is it? Yeah. That this whole story of this Catholic Buddhist guy, he says that this is a parable of our culture in the West. That this is the generation that wants justice, but not any sense of righteousness.
Yeah.
We are hungry for community, but have no taste for the cross. We want the goods of the good news without the Christ of the gospel.
Yes.
We want the life of the kingdom without the claims of the king.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that Christianity has actually formed so much of what makes our Western culture.
Yes.
And that a lot of people, without knowing it, actually believe quite a few things sort of start from a Christian
Yes.
start point.
Yes.
Like this idea of justice
Yes.
and that kind of thing. And I find it's interesting. And it can be incredibly useful as well. I'll show you. You want to say something, and then I'll
No.
go.
No, well, that is true. So many people don't seem to realise, wanting to portray the church as irrelevant, passé, something that has no validity now, and actually we want to throw off its shackles in a sense.
Yeah.
But actually they don't realise how, and also the claim that they've been the cause of all the troubles in the world.
Yeah.
They don't realise how much over the centuries since Christ was on earth, things have been shaped and changed for good. Now I'm aware there have been some distortions and
Yes,
some
of
awful
course.
things, but also actually the things that we just take for granted in terms of what is good, what is right. The whole concept of human rights, of of justice and that sort of thing, is actually founded on this,
exactly.
on the Bible.
And this can be one of the ways that we could actually go out and meet people where they are.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Here's another book for you. This is a very good book by a chap called Glenn Packiam. It's called The Air We Breathe. How we all came to believe in freedom, kindness, progress, and equality. And there are others in there as well that he goes through. So the book kind of talks about where does this notion of freedom come from, and where does kindness, this be kind to each other, and all this kind. What are the origins of it? And he digs back down and shows that it's actually it comes from Christianity. So you can actually use this as a place to meet people where they're at. Oh, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in... Okay, but you believe in equality, don't you?
Yes.
You believe in justice, don't you? Oh, yes, of course. Oh, we believe in equality.
So where did that idea come from?
Well, let's just explore that a little bit.
Yes.
Actually,
yes.
It starts in the Bible.
Yes.
And people are very surprised. And it could be a way. I mean, it's not the only way, but it could be a way of trying to meet
depending
people
on where the person is at that you're talking to.
Of course, of course.
Yes.
But I just thought that was interesting to throw that out.
Yeah.
We will have a little break now, I think. We shall go and have some notices, and then we'll be back very shortly. See you soon. Hello, welcome back. Apologies for the notices. Maybe we'll just pause like this for a while, just to give you a bit of a surprise. Anyway, sorry about that. The video didn't quite work as we had hoped, but hopefully you got some of the important messages.
Well, the wonders of modern technology.
Yes. Right, so we had some things to read out from comments and things that we've been getting.
Yes, there's been quite a conversation going on. Going back to Anna's put in, I don't know how to be where someone else is at, she says. And then there's some comments come in, so Maggie's put in, I think it's just getting to know them, not judging them, finding out how they think and feel, and praying for God to give natural opportunities to share something of Jesus with them. I think it's very practical advice on how to get the feel of where somebody is. Actually listen to them, basically.
Yes.
And Clive's put in a comment here. On the Emmaus Road, Jesus fell in step with them, but brought a different perspective. The challenge is falling in step, coming alongside really with them. Then you can bring that different perspective. But if you're not walking with them, your perspective will be irrelevant to them.
And I suppose it also means the meeting people where they are.
That's right.
It's all the things that you've been saying, but it's also.
I think Maggie's kind of fleshing it out a bit more.
Yes.
There.
No, but I know I sometimes get the feeling that, oh, well, I want this person to know more about Jesus or whatever. They must come to church, or they must come to this church program, or come to this church event.
Yeah.
If only they came to this church thing.
They just don't know what they're missing, sort of thing.
Then they'll get it, you know. So I think part of it is not relying on, well, they must come to church, they must hear this person preach, or they must hear that sermon or whatever. It's more a case of, let me go to them, let me go and have coffee with them, let me chat with them, let me find out what they know, or what they think they know, or what they don't know, and oh, look, they're quite passionate about justice. Okay, now I know where to start. Let's talk about that. Or maybe they're not passionate about justice. Maybe it's something completely different.
That's
you know.
Right. But that's the thing. If you get to the situation they're in, and you're listening to that, then you'll begin to find out what is God saying into that situation, rather than here's my presentation, you take it or leave
here's a
it,
PowerPoint I've prepared, watch this.
Or
you're
read
right.
this book, or come to this meeting.
It's more a relationship with them, and finding out what their problems or needs or whatever are, or passionate about or whatever, and then just saying, okay, Holy Spirit, what do you have to say to them in this?
Yes. And also, he talks about the importance of the hospitality, the bit about the giving, the breaking the bread and sharing it. But again, you see, if we begin to invite people in, not to, you know, a formal religious thing, but actually to share our life with us.
Yeah.
Again,
Invite them into our lives rather than into our church.
That's right. And let them see what the difference is in our lives. You know, that when they're faced with the situations that they can't handle, it should be that you see the difference. You know, that you may actually have what they're looking for. I mean, I remember somebody saying it to me sort of years ago. It was a lot of years ago. This lady, I had known her in a particular context, and then she came round one day wanting to talk to me, and she said, I don't know, she said, you've got what I want. Well, you know, that's really it. But that's not because, you know, she'd come and listen to lots of sermons
or you'd
or
given
whatever.
her a flyer to come to whatever church special event it was.
It's like, you know, we're building a relationship.
Yeah.
And we're facing the sort of, I mean, we were young mums in those days, you know, and that's the thing. If we can sort of be alongside people where they are and willing to live our lives in those situations,
and give our lives, give of ourselves in that situation.
And what Clive said there about, you know, when Jesus, he fell into step with them on their journey and the road to Emmaus and their thing, but then he brought a different perspective on their situation. Not come over here to a totally different thing, this is all irrelevant. It's actually, well, in this situation, this is what God is saying in it. And then suddenly they begin to see their own situation from a different perspective. But you only do that if you actually begin to make relationship with people.
Yep. And what better way to build relationship than around the table over a meal?
Yes.
Good, thank you for those questions. Really good. We will be coming near the end of our discussion. We will be talking a bit about trying to identify some of the gaps that we might see in our community, like in Wisbech, in our town. So if you can be thinking about that and popping that in the comments, then when we come round to discussing it, we can pull out some of the comments that have been made. What are the gaps that you've noticed in our community, in our society?
The areas where actually, if the church was functioning, it could be making a difference. You know, the church as in the people of the church, not well, sometimes it's the organisation, but actually where we could make a difference.
Where we could possibly make a difference in our community by going out rather than expecting people to come in. Yeah. So we'll come on to that in just a bit, but get your thinking caps on. There was a great bit that you've really like, which is next in the book, which is talking about this whole picture of sort of the stars and
when all
the stars
the bit that's headed "When All the Stars Are Gone." Page 176. If anybody's got the book.
What does that mean? And what's he going on about?
He uses a very good illustration about the roof over the centre court at Wimbledon. So here in the Wimbledon tennis tournament, as some of you will know, there is actually a removable roof above the centre court, which means that if it's bad weather on the day of the final, they can still play it. You know.
Close the roof and carry on.
That's right, exactly. And it also means that you can actually continue later into the night, because you don't have to worry about the light failing, because of course you can have artificial light under that roof. So so it's a retractable roof. Here we are, and it allowed the match to run more than an hour later than any previous match. Here's the point though: when a roof is closed over a sporting arena, it doesn't matter whether there are clouds or stars in the sky. All that matters is the match on the field. And I thought that was as he says, it's a perfect metaphor for the secular age. We don't know whether there's a God or 10,000 gods or a force in the universe, or even simply the universe as a divine entity, which, you know, doesn't make a lot of sense. But we don't know. But what we do know is that there's a match taking place on the field of life that needs our attention. We've got to sort out our lives, and frankly, there are more pressing questions than who God is. we don't have time to deal with questions about religion which have little or no bearing on how we actually live. And that's that picture, you know, of the roof. So therefore, what's going on up there is totally irrelevant. Why, you know, and people say, oh, well, why can't we just get on with being good neighbours, loving each other, etc. But then there comes the time when suddenly you need the stars, and it's another story from the Bible that he uses when Paul is on the boat, and there's a storm, and the ship is getting shipwrecked. And in that storm, the problem is they can't see the stars. Navigate. They can't navigate. And I suppose that's the thing. If the match is going well, to go back to our tennis analogy, that's fine. But what if terrible things are starting to happen on this pitch, and you don't understand why, and you're beginning to sort of think, ugh, it's all out of control. Then you suddenly sort of think, we need to
some
see.
direction.
Yes, we need to see.
We need to understand
where we're going.
Yeah.
That's right. So when the heavens were closed off for those sailors on the boat, they couldn't navigate without the sun by day or the stars by night. How were they to know where they were? They'd lost their bearings in the storm and had no means of regaining it. And again, this bit about actually reaching out for the life of the world. Often there are situations where people either on an individual level have lost all their bearings and everything's going chaotic. Certainly on the bigger scale, you don't have to look very far to see that things are actually getting seriously out of control, and there's real sort of worry and anxiety because what's gone wrong? Where are the bearings? This is where we need to get back to.
And it's interesting, isn't it, when something does go wrong, how so many people turn to prayer, don't they? Quite a lot of people turn to prayer in times of pressing need or panic or fear or whatever.
Yes.
But a lot of them don't know who they're praying to, or they're just praying to faith or the universe or whatever. And that's the thing. And there's just having said that just reminded me of when I had cancer some years ago now, and when I was going through that whole time, I got lots of messages from different people from all walks of life, and some with faith, some with no faith, and it was really easy to tell who had faith and who hadn't, just by what they'd said in the message. It was, I'm praying for you. You think, okay, that, thank you, really great. But then others were like, I'm sending good vibes, and they're trying to express, and what they were expressing was good, and they were trying to give comfort, and they were trying to express their concern, and they were, but somehow the depth of meaning and the level of comfort and the sort of the power of certainty that came with someone just saying, I'm praying for you, compared to someone who was sending good vibes, was worlds apart. Yeah.
Yes, you probably didn't really feel the vibes.
It's just interesting. Just
Yes. Yes, it's. Yes, carry on.
Well, I was just going to move on to the next bit there, because that whole navigation thing, and he starts to suggest, will radical hospitality possibly be the answer?
Yes.
Even in a hostile environment where we might find ourselves, maybe rather than kicking against it, actually.
And sort of standing in judgment on it.
Standing in judgment, or digging our heels in or whatever, but actually saying, okay, let's respond to this with radical hospitality rather than.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what that means, because Anna might put in what does that mean, radical hospitality. So we'll see.
Yeah, she's put in another comment here actually. That roof thing was why I became a Christian. My brother's friend talked about Jesus as if he was his friend, not a long way away like the stars, which is how I saw God. And oh yes, we're coming into the gaps thing in a minute. But yeah, that's I've just lost my thread there. Hang on. Oh yes, because again with that the picture he in Acts, Paul when he was shipwrecked. One of the things that happens is that Paul actually again breaks bread.
Yeah.
Before they're all going to have to abandon the ship basically, but it's like before they throw everything overboard, you need to eat, because they've all been too busy sort of rushing about in the panic. And so actually here he comes and sort of says, no, stop, you must all eat. So he actually breaks bread, gives thanks.
In the midst of
midst of all the chaos. This, again, just as Jesus in the midst of their disillusionment breaks the bread, it's like you're sort of reaching out with the bread of life here. I mean, obviously the literal bread, but actually what it represents as well.
And even in your chaos, Jesus can meet you there.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
So, carry on.
Right, so we don't have very long left.
No.
So shall we fast forward a little bit into this radical hospitality thing? So he uses quite a nice quote from N.T. Wright. So I'll read that quote out from N.T. Wright to start us off, I think. Okay. So this is what N.T. Wright says. The Christian vocation is to be in prayer in the Spirit, at the place where the world is in pain. And as we embrace that vocation, we discover it to be the way of following Christ, shaped according to his messianic vocation to the cross, with arms outstretched, holding on simultaneously to the pain of the world and to the love of God. Learn new ways of praying with and from the pain, the brokenness of the crucial part of the world where God has placed you.
Yes.
So it's starting to ask the question of us in our context, in our locality, in our communities more sort of widely, rather than just the church community, in our community, how, in what ways can we reach out? How can we be in the pain, holding one hand to God and one hand to the brokenness of the world, and trying to break this bread of Jesus in the midst of the chaos?
Yeah.
Where is there chaos in our community? Where is there a gap that isn't being filled? And he gives some examples of his church and how they've managed to identify a few gaps and some sort of success stories from that, rather than he talks about putting down the megaphone and picking up towels and tables instead.
Yes.
So rather than sort of shouting at the world or people, rather than saying, okay, let's put that down and let's actually just come and serve people.
Yes, that's right. It's he uses the illustration of Jesus taking the towel, doesn't he? Yeah. He took off his outer garment, grabbed a towel. If Jesus took a towel and began to wash the dirty feet of his betrayer and denier, then surely the body of Christ ought not to take a posture of superiority and yell at the world, but actually to. And
it's also that idea of going out from the church, because the story on the road to Emmaus is away from religious places. The story in the boat is away from the religious environment.
Yes.
And it's going away from,
into the place that people are actually living in.
Where
most
people
of the
are living
time.
in, and helping people with the problems that they actually are facing.
Yes. Well, Maggie and Richard have put some comments in response to this identifying gaps. Maggie's put, mental health services are very poor, but it's not an area where we could help without some training, although we can always listen to people. Food and fuel poverty, homelessness, Richard Welford, homelessness, that's how the Ferry Project started, which is, of course, an example from our church of identifying a need and getting there. But actually, you see, like what Maggie says there about, mental health services are very poor, but actually it is an area where you can help even if you aren't a trained professional, because actually in terms of the mental health services, which are very stretched, we know, one of the key elements, in fact the key element, and even the most helpful professional thing, is actually time, and somebody to listen, and somebody to give you time. And that's what's not available. It's not knowing which tablet to take, it's actually people having time. Now, you don't actually have to be a highly qualified psychiatrist to be able to just give somebody time and listen to them. And that is actually a tremendous contribution to mental health welfare. And we can all do that because we all know people who actually need somebody who will just have time to listen to them. And yes, the number of professionals available to do that is very vanishingly small, and you're usually on a long 18-month waiting list for a 6-week course, at the end of which, that's the end of that relationship. You really, in that sense, it's not. I mean, I heard recently of somebody who was sort of told, forget all this God stuff, you need professional help. Well, actually, the professional help isn't the magic bullet anyway. And of course the other thing is it probably won't be available except, in a very limited quantity after a very long wait. But God is there, and God's people are there, and the relationships where people can come alongside and just be with somebody, those are really precious and I do believe make far more difference than is often given credit.
Well, more recently we had the food bank started up, didn't it? That was sort of came out of identifying a need there. But these are needs that's a need that's now being addressed because the food bank exists and the food bank is there.
Right. Yes.
And we can carry on helping and supporting things that are existing already. But, maybe a few other people have some other ideas out there. So thank you, Richard and Maggie, for those contributions. But if there are any others, and maybe this could be something that we go away and pray about. It might not be screamingly obvious. It might be something more tucked away. It might be something that, isn't particularly obvious, but is still a need. And so we might need to actually go and pray about this and say, where are the needs in our community?
Yes.
How can we, as a church or as individuals or as a church or whatever, how can we start to try and address these and to be given and to bring Jesus into the situation? Because God knows, doesn't he? He knows where the needs are.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah. And of course he also knows where people are on their journey, and it's in a sense, he knows when is the point where somebody is ready. And if we're sensitive to his leading, then maybe we can be the means that he uses at that point. Rather than us banging endlessly on random doors, he actually can bring us to the ones who are ready to open. No, there's not anything further at the moment.
Good. Well, have you got any other points to make on this chapter?
No, I don't. I don't think so.
I think we've dealt with it quite thoroughly.
Well, I would recommend anybody read it who hasn't read it, because obviously we're just talking about the thoughts that it sparked as we've read it. But it was a very good chapter. Yes. Yeah.
And yes, we are coming to the end of this book, as I mentioned at the start of this session. Next week is our final discussion about this book. It's going to be the final chapter. There's a surprise. So we will be back again next week to talk about the final chapter.
Which is called The King's Feast.
The King's Feast, yes. And it might be, for some who are watching, if you have read the book, it might be a good idea to start thinking about sort of some of your general responses to it. Did you enjoy the book? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it complicated? Was it straightforward? Was it too simple? Whatever. Save your thoughts, bring them next week, because it's our concluding session on it. I know I've enjoyed reading it and discussing it and finding out what other people have been thinking about it. So, yeah, that's been good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona, for all your help. Because you're not on next week, are you?
No, I'm not on next
so,
week.
yeah. Yeah, good. And I think, yes, next week I might have to bring some bread in. A celebratory last sort of hurrah with some actual bread.
That's it. Lynn's just put in an example of somebody identifying a gap here. At Greenbelt a couple of years ago, someone spoke about a junk food project. They started up a cafe receiving food that would be thrown away by expiry. So, yes, that, again, just a simple example of somebody who sort of thought, oh, there's something I can do. Yeah.
Oh, good. We kept Clive awake, he says. We didn't put him to sleep. Well, there we go. Well done, Clive. You managed to stay with us.
Be awake when I get him home to give him his bedtime drink.
Yes. So we will be having church this coming Sunday at 10 a.m. in the Queen Mary Centre. But then the Christmas Day service is going to be happening with a united service at the Baptist Church at 10 a.m. on Christmas Day. So please feel free to join us there. Otherwise, we do look forward to seeing you back here live again 7:30 Friday next week on YouTube for our final discussion about Blessed, Broken, Given just before Christmas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.